Hey everyone, it's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast and Cincy Jungle. Thanks for joining us and downloading the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, all of the different ways you've been able to check out our show. We've appreciated the support. We've received quite a few positive reviews so far, and for a new show, that's always good to hear. So thank you for the support. But welcome to this week, episode 11. The Bengals are going to be taking on the Dallas Cowboys. They sit at 2-2. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Dolphins game that occurred last week, and also a couple of different little spins on some news and notes that are going around with the Cincinnati Bengals. This week I'm joined by Connor Howe. Connor, how have you been doing? I know it's been a little while since we've seen the Bengals play football. They kind of had that mini bye, but you still hanging in there?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. I'm excited for football to be back.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my brother, actually, and it was funny. We were kind of chatting, and we couldn't believe that 25% of the season is already behind us. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
We're at the quarter way mark, and it seems to have flown by. The Bengals have battled through some missing personnel, be it injury or suspension or what have you. They have lost two tough games against two good opponents. So they sit at 2-2, and they're ready to take on the Dallas Cowboys. Before we get to that game, let's take a trip down memory lane, I guess, and check out, just kind of talk about some things with the Miami Dolphins game. The Bengals handled them pretty well. 22-7 was the score. Pretty even early on, and then the Bengals really started to pull away. Connor, what was kind of your biggest surprise that you saw out of the Bengals on that game?
I fully expected the Bengals to kind of wallop the Dolphins, and I think they kind of did what we were all expecting, but it reminded me a lot of the game last year when the Bengals played the Chiefs, and the Chiefs scored 21 points on 7 field goals because they just couldn't score a touchdown. And the big Kenny Stills touchdown was honestly, in my opinion, just a really good play call by the Dolphins. I think they caught the Bengals in personnel that the Bengals probably didn't want to be in on defense, and then Gase just dialed up that deep pass to Kenny Stills. But aside from that play, Jarvis Landry did nothing. Devontae Parker, I don't even know if he caught a pass. If he did, it was for very minimal yards. The Dolphins couldn't do anything on offense, and they couldn't stop the Bengals on defense. So the only thing that really didn't go in Cincinnati's favor in that game, at least in my opinion, was the red zone offense. And that's kind of been a theme throughout the season, as we all know, is just the red zone inefficiency. And part of that has to be on coaching, and a lot of that also has to be on execution. The line has really struggled in the red zone. The running backs haven't been great. Andy Dalton hasn't really had a security blanket in the red zone. He doesn't like throwing up that pass he doesn't really like throwing those fades to Green like he used to early on. I think that's just because he threw one too many interceptions on those. I think he got picked off on a pass like that in the Ravens game last year. I think the Steelers might have picked him off last year or the year before. I think those fades to Green aren't as reliable as a pass to Eifert, because Eifert just gets wide open or comes down with the ball through two guys. So I think the biggest thing the Bengals are looking for now is just they need to be able to score in the red zone, because this has been such an issue for them.
So I want to get your take on this. In a post-game kind of analysis post that I put up on the website, I noted that obviously A.J. Green had a great day, great evening against the Dolphins. I noted that his two big catches that he had, I said they were kind of poor throws by Andy Dalton, and I got raked across the coals by our readers in our comments.
Yeah, I saw that.
If you saw that. I contended that though the first one that he threw up to A.J. Green, though he rolled out of pressure, kind of threw off his back foot a bit, ball was still severely underthrown, and Green had to high point the ball. On the second occasion down the other sideline, he did get it over the corner and before the safety got there, but Green had to catch the ball around his knee or shin area. So that's why I called those poor throws. Was I crazy in saying that, or are the readers right? Somewhere in between?
I don't think that you're wrong at all, and I don't think the readers are either. I get what you're saying. So first off, let me just talk. I think what the readers generally in the audience thought about those Dalton throws were the escapability. I remember the Eli Manning to David Tyree pass in the Super Bowl, and the pass wasn't great. The catch was so memorable, but the best part of the play wasn't the part where Tyree caught it on his helmet. It was the fact that Eli Manning escaped from all that pressure, somehow got a pass downfield that landed anywhere within Tyree's general vicinity. And on those passes where you're talking about, I think that Dalton kind of just, he got out of the, I mean, the offensive line kind of collapsed. Not necessarily like Dalton wasn't running for his life, but he wasn't comfortable in the pocket. He kind of rolled out to his right a little bit and he threw it downfield. And I get what you're saying with that is he still doesn't have that deep ball where he's going to hit AJ Green in stride for the easy touchdown. You're right. That should have been an easy touchdown if it's coming from a guy like Ben or, you know, Stafford or Cutler or someone with a cannon for an arm who can hit those downfield throws. But yeah, I don't think you were wrong. I don't think the readers were wrong. I think it was just kind of a mix of Dalton had great escapability on that play, but valuable is that because yeah, he got the pass off. Yeah, Green got the catch downfield. But like you mentioned, it could have been both of those could have been touchdowns with better throws. So I think it's kind of just midway point, honestly.
Well, that's good to hear because I was sitting there reading some of those comments and going, wow, I didn't realize this was such a hot button issue there. But, you know, I think Bengals fans also continue to look for any kind of slight of Andy Dalton, and they rush to his defense. But regardless, the plays were made. So kudos to Andy Dalton escaping pressure on that one play. And, you know, those are plays that needed to be made in a game that the Bengals kicked 5 field goals. And you know, lo and behold, they did. So, you know, I mean, I guess I was kind of picking nits, as they say, and, you know, kind of getting on Dalton there, but I didn't feel that those were that great of throws. However, the Bengals did win 22-7. Your MVP, I think for me, it came down to obviously AJ Green. He had another monster game that rivaled his week 1 opener against the New York Jets. But also, as I mentioned, there were 5 field goals kicked by Mike Nugent, and a couple of them were from long distance. Who do you think gets your MVP and why?
I think it has to be Green. I think that's the obvious answer, but he's just that guy where he makes those plays. He just does what it takes to make those plays downfield. Like people talked about that Dalton throw where, you know, he threw up a 50-50 ball, but no one was even remotely close to nervous about the fact that it was a one-on-one ball to AJ Green. He was going to come down with the ball regardless. And we've just seen that time in and time out through 4 weeks. I mean, he has 2 games, I think, at least 150 yards. The Steeler game, he really didn't play that well, but I just credit the Steelers, and they're a common opponent, and the Bengals generally struggle against common opponents. But even in that Broncos game, which, you know, by all quotes was a bad game for Green, he still had 77 yards against the best secondary in football. So, I mean, not just this week was he the MVP. He's been the MVP through 4 weeks. And I think I think we kind of were talking about it a little bit earlier. It's just this is the year where Green really could become that like definitive number 1. If not, he's been perennially left out of the conversation as who's the best wide receiver in the NFL. People have to consider him. I mean, Odell Beckham's playing bad, but it shouldn't be about how well Odell Beckham's playing. AJ Green has had 250-yard games, a 77-yard game against the best secondary in the entire NFL. You just can't leave him out of the conversation. And Nugent had a great game as well. And I think it's also worth mentioning that we finally saw Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap convert those pressures into something more than just pressures. I think we were talking about that last week, that you need those pressures to turn to sacks. And pressures, like we all know, are what make mistakes from an offense occur. But the sacks do change momentum, and I think that counts for something.
Yeah, great call on that. I guess I still go with Green as well, but you can't understate what Nugent did not only Thursday night, but really
he played great.
And after such a terrible preseason, he has played outstanding so far for the Bengals this year. Knock on wood, because we know kickers are kind of fickle beasts there. So.
Well, and it's funny because you see, I mean, I might have said this last week, but the Browns kicker, who a lot of Bengal fans were pretty interested in, Cody Parkey, who was the Eagles kicker, then got cut by the Dolphins this preseason, but he ended up in Cleveland. missed 3 kicks, including a potential game winner against, I think it was maybe it was the Ravens. It might have been a different team. Yeah, that was bad. No, maybe it was the Redskins, but that was
it was. I think it was the Redskins. Yeah. But you're spot on about the pressure and all of that. That was good to see. I mentioned in last week's show that the Dolphins had only let up 6 sacks going into that Thursday night. Their offensive line had only allowed 6 sacks going into that game. The Bengals offensive line had allowed 12, and I believe the Bengals had, a small handful of sacks, probably, I think, if I remember correctly, 4 or so that evening, and they only allowed 1. So that was a big difference in that game. And if you were to tell me as this season began that through the quarter-way mark, Will Clark would be tied for the team lead in quarterback sacks with 3, I would have thought you were crazy. And somehow he and Margus Hunt, your boy Margus Hunt, they keep flashing.
And it's funny because Margus Hunt has 0 sacks, but
right. He's getting in there.
Think if someone read the box, if Cincy Jungle didn't exist and we weren't all talking about Margus Hunt, people would still be saying cut Hunt, cut Hunt, cut Hunt.
Right.
It's all it's not the numbers. He's been generating credit the whole defensive line. Michael Johnson hasn't been amazing as a pass rusher. He got half a sack last week. He's been pretty decent against the run. Domata Peko had that great heads up play to recover the fumble. Margus Hunt, Will Clark are both playing really well as rotational players. It seems so crazy the Bengals didn't want to at least draft a guy at the end or bring in a guy from free agency, especially if they're losing Wallace Gilberry. But it looks like they made a great call.
Yeah, and some of it was by their choice, and some of it was because of some personnel losses along the defensive line. Andrew Billings being one, Brandon Thompson still on PUP, that sort of thing. Even though they played defensive tackle, those were guys that were going to have roster spots this year if they were healthy. So kudos to them. They're stepping up, and it's something that the Bengals really, really needed this year. I agree with you on the biggest disappointment is that red zone offense. And before that being a really good segue into a couple of returns of Bengals players, I want to get one last quick thought from you. Your thoughts on the Bengals color rush uniforms, or lack thereof, since they were white and black. I thought they were pretty rad.
I loved them.
Yeah.
Loved them.
Yeah.
I think the Dolphins color rush uniforms were so stupid. I tweeted a picture of the Dolphins color rush uniforms next to a piece of American cheese, and it went viral. My phone is still getting notifications from it because they looked so awful. I think even with the helmets, it'd be awesome if they were white and black helmets, but even still, the color, I just got a color rush uniform. I don't know where it went. And I wore it to school one day, and some guy was like, "It's a sick uniform, man." I was like, "Yeah, I know it is. It's a sweet uniform." But yeah, it looked sweet. I think the Dolphins ones should have been either that teal, it's a weird teal color, which I don't like, but it would have been better than the American cheese yellow, or go with they like the old orange they used to wear. They used to wear that orange and teal, and then they switched to I think they kind of took that orange out of it or something. But they used to have a lot more it was almost a Bengals-ish orange that I didn't get the color of their uniforms. It looked terrible. I think it would have been it had the potential to be one of the best uniform matchups of the season if the Dolphins had a nice uniform.
Yeah, it could have been really creative, and I agree with you. I also saw something on SB Nation's NFL Twitter feed where they did who wore it better, and it was a picture of a Dolphins player in a creamsicle pop. So. But the Bengals come out of that game with a win, a much-needed win, especially after losing to Denver the week prior. And they sit at 2-2. And right now, one of the things we saw on Thursday night was the return of Vontaze Burfict. And while he didn't necessarily pop off of the stat sheet and didn't make the absolute wow plays, he did have a nice pass breakup at one point. He did have a few tackles, and you kind of saw, even though it started off a little shaky with that Stills touchdown you mentioned, they really settled in, and the pass rush picked up. The secondary played a lot better down the stretch, and you could just tell the Dolphins were out of their element on offense. So your thoughts on the overall impact of Vontaze Burfict, even though this unit was talented with him out of the lineup. Do you think that this was just some weird anomaly that the Bengals just started to kind of pick up steam as a defensive unit, and the pass rush picked up? Do you think Burfict had just an overarching effect on the defense, or a little bit of both?
I think you have to take it with a grain of salt because you're playing against Tannehill and a team that really doesn't even have a running back. I mean, Arian Foster was out. Their starting running back was Damian Williams, who I don't even know was on their roster at the beginning of the season. But I think that like we all know, it's so strange, but this team plays so much better when Vontaze Burfict's in the lineup. And I really don't know what it is. I'm sure Burfict, like, he's a great player, like, but even when he doesn't make plays, his teammates make plays when he's on the field. And I think that now that he's back, you have him and Dansby, who's played really good in coverage. You have Ray Maluga, who's still a great player for what he is. We all know that he's not, a coverage guy, but he's a good run stuffer. He's like an average or better player for what he is. And then you have Vinny Ray, who's like a swing guy who can play any position, who's been balling out this year. And then you have young guys in the rotation who can, bring energy in a play or two. And then you have a secondary, which the Bengals are going up against the Dolphins, who the Dolphins are so adamant about the fact that they have one of the best receiving tandems, receiving groups, whatever it is in the league with, Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, and Devontae Parker. And they did nothing. I mean, aside from that one touchdown, which was pretty much just an indictment on the Bengals safeties. And like I said earlier, a great play call by Gase. It really wasn't anything. Even if the safeties didn't mess up on that play, I think he still would have caught that touchdown. He's just a burner. But they shut down, a great receiving trio or duo, whatever it is, without Drake Kirkpatrick. They had, reserve corners playing the entire game. And obviously, like I said, it has to be taken with a grain of salt. You're playing Tannehill. You're playing a team that doesn't really have a run game. But you're playing Dallas this week. Dallas might not have Dez. They probably won't have Dez. And even if they do have Dez, I mean, they have a run. You know that Burfict is going to make a huge impact against the run. If Dallas can't run the ball, the game's over for them. And Burfict is the run defense. You can look up the numbers. It's been like exponentially better when Burfict's on the field. So he brings a huge element to the defense, and he can hold his own in coverage. So it's a huge get to have him back.
Yeah, and it's not just the physicality on field play of Burfict either. It's a little bit of the leadership, a little bit of the fire, a little bit of that nastiness that a lot of other teams don't like when it comes to Vontaze Burfict. But getting that back is just just a big boost for this defense, I think. And as he continues to get his legs under him, I think this defense will be even stronger as the season goes on. The other guy we thought might be suiting up against the Dallas Cowboys, hadn't played at all this year, but had a setback, is Tyler Eifert. He had an ankle issue that we all know about. Apparently he tweaked his back at some point in practice, and he hasn't practiced this week. So Marvin Lewis still left open the door of a possibility of him playing in Dallas. It seems unlikely. They might give him one more week and really get him back against New England, but we'll see about that. Obviously, when we're talking about the return of Tyler Eifert, we're talking about those. It's almost a direct correlation with the red zone issues. And I wrote a post on Cincy Jungle about the tight ends and how the Bengals have looked with and without Tyler Eifert since 2015. So if you look at the stats in the 12 games he played in the regular season with the Bengals, they were 10-2. And if you count the game that he got knocked out with a concussion against the Steelers as a game that was missed, there's 4 games at the end of 2015, and then there's 4 games in this season. The Bengals are 4-4. Now, there's an A.J. McCarron factor in that comes into play there. There's obviously playing the Steelers twice, Denver twice. All of that kind of comes into play. But is that kind of an anomaly in terms of statistics, or do you think that just having him back will really boost this offense, especially with all that new personnel and a new offensive coordinator?
I think it has to boost this offense. You look at Brandon LaFell's numbers compared to Marvin Jones's numbers from last year through 4 weeks, and they're virtually identical, minus, I think, 1 or 2 touchdowns that Jones had. Obviously, we all know Jones is a better player than LaFell, but just the production that's coming from the wide receiver 2 position isn't something that's been a huge catastrophic drop off. And so you know that once Tyler Eifert comes back, that it's not only going to drastically improve your tight end position, but LaFell is going to get even like less. He's going to be focused on even less. I mean, teams are focusing on LaFell whether people want to believe it or not. He had I think 90 something yards in the first week of the season, and so he's back, and he's back to his pre bad year last year form, at least as of now. So you have Green and LaFell, and just adding Eifert is just, we all know it's just this huge dynamic playmaker who can seemingly bring down any ball that's in his general vicinity, and really open things up in the red zone. I think it'll be a huge impact. I think the one thing I will say is that this is a defense the Bengals should be able to shred even without Eifert. If the Bengals offense can't move the ball this week, then, I don't know if Eifert coming back is necessarily going to change that much, because you need your players to play, and you have a run game that should be playing well against a defensive line that really isn't that good. Plus they have, I think all the Cowboy fans are talking about, DeMarcus Lawrence, I think, is the guy that's coming back off suspension or whatever. Okay, but it's his first game back. Like we saw with Burfict last week, it's not like he's just going to come in and, make 5 sacks and 3 tackles for loss or whatever. It's just a defense that their best player is Byron Jones, who's their, kind of like a Tyrann Mathieu type, who is a hybrid defensive back who his number one thing is he can cover tight ends. So it would have been nice to have Eifert, because even if he doesn't do anything, Byron Jones, their best defender, is on him, which opens things up for Green and LaFell and Boyd and whoever else might be on offense. But the Cowboys don't have a good secondary. They don't have a good defensive line. They have Sean Lee, who's a pretty decent linebacker, but their linebackers aren't still. Giovanni Bernard should still be able to tear them up in the pass game. So I think that even if Eifert misses this week, this is a game that the Bengals should win. And I think that there really isn't an excuse for the offense in the red zone this week. I think this is the week that things should turn out in the Bengals. You have to get things going, especially with Foxborough coming up next week.
If you go back to kind of that 2015/2016 stat line I mentioned with tight ends and Tyler Eifert. Eifert had 13 touchdown receptions in those 13 games he played last year, even though he missed most of that Steelers game. So if you count that as a missed game, you've got 13 touchdowns from Eifert. CJ Uzomah and Tyler Kroft have 1 touchdown combined over those 8 games where they were out without Eifert. So while those two have stepped up pretty admirably, that is a big disparity in numbers there that you've seen. So
and you have that drop touchdown, which is so frustrating too.
Right. So I don't expect him to play this Sunday. Unfortunately, if this back thing didn't happen, I would have expected him to suit up. But that being said, the Bengals are off along basically a mini bye with that Thursday night game. They do travel to Dallas, and I'm going to throw out a couple stats to you as we preview this game, Connor. And you tell me if it's something that you should be worried about, or if it's kind of the Dallas Cowboys being charlatans at this point. They're with a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back, and no Dez Bryant at least last week. Dak Prescott has committed no turnovers, fumbles, or interceptions through 4 games, and Ezekiel Elliott has almost reached 150 rushing yards the last 2 weeks. Now, that is a big formula to their 3-1 record so far. But in those last 2 games, especially with Elliott and his stats, the Cowboys have played the San Francisco 49ers, who I believe are 1-3 and are playing on Thursday night, as well as a really struggling Chicago Bears team. So are they charlatans? Are they guys that the league just haven't figured out yet, or are these guys the real deal?
I don't know. I really don't believe in them. And I'll say that I have a roommate who's a Cowboy fan, and he still doesn't think they've been tested this year either. It's just they have played a bunch of really simple defenses that really they've played the Giants, the Redskins, the Niners, and the Bears. There aren't that many teams that have worse defenses than those four. I mean, the Giants have improved this year, but if you look at the Giants' schedule, their numbers have improved because they've played bad teams as well. So, I mean, I really just don't think this is that good of a team. Prescott hasn't really been asked to do that much. He hasn't run at all, which he did a lot in college. So he's more of a pocket passer. And he really hasn't been that. I mean, people are going to say, oh, he's been playing really well. Obviously, that he looks good in the box score, but the reason why he's played well is just because the run game has been so dominant. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott hasn't had to, like we all see, the holes for Elliott to run through are like enormous. And so that is definitely, I think, going to be the focal point of this game is what are the Cowboys going to do if they can't run? And what are the Bengals going to do if the Cowboys are able to run? Because with Vontaze Burfict back, and this is his, he had his one game where, okay, he was tired from not being able to participate in all the activities over the offseason, but he needs to step up now. This is the game where Burfict should have 10-plus tackles, and the run just shouldn't be working for Dallas. Make Dak Prescott have to use his arm. Like he hasn't like been completing these really deep passes or any giant playmaking. Des Bryant wasn't a factor when he was on the field because Dak Prescott is just throwing like little drag routes to Cole Beasley. So, I mean, I just think that this is an offense where the league they're playing well just as a mixture of they don't have to do that much because the run game is working so well. And obviously that's a credit to the offensive line. The offensive line is great. I think they're the best run blocking line in the entire NFL. I think that's not an excuse for the Bengals. I think the Cowboys are not a good team. I don't care they're 3-1. I don't care that Dak Prescott hasn't turned the ball over. I don't think he's been asked to do that much. I don't think the Cowboys have had to do that much because they've had a pretty easy first 4 games the year. I think this is a game the Bengals need to win. They should. I mean, it's not a must win, but I think it's a game they should win. I think last week, like I was saying with the Dolphins, it's a game you can't lose. This is a winnable game on your schedule. You have to win it. And the Cowboys, their home field advantage is non-existent because they're better on the road than at home. So that's not an excuse either.
Yeah, no Tony Romo, probably no Des Bryant. You mentioned the offensive line, which is one of the best in the NFL. They appeared to be getting Tyron Smith back, their Pro Bowl left tackle. He returned to practice on Thursday after missing, I think, a couple of games. So that brings.
Yeah, I don't think he's played yet, and he's the best in the NFL when he's healthy too.
Yeah. So I mean, that gives them the 3 first-round picks: Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and Travis Frederick along that offensive line. They also have a good right tackle in Doug Free, who's been playing. So. A very good offensive line there. You're aside from maybe the one you mentioned about making Dak Prescott throw, your one key that you think is of utmost importance for the Bengals in order to come out of Dallas with a win?
Run the ball. I just want to see him run the ball. I mean, it's been 4 weeks. I think
everybody does. I think everybody wants to see him do that.
Yeah. I don't care if it's not working. Keep doing it because it's going to work. This is the one team on your schedule where you can afford to just keep running. If it doesn't work, throw a bomb to AJ Green because he's going to catch it. I just think this is the game you have to get your run game going because the Patriots don't have that good of a run defense either. And and that's how you beat the Patriots defense is by running the ball. And so you need to get the ground game going. You're facing a really, besides the Patriots game, 3 teams you really should beat in the next 4 weeks. So you got to get 3 of those. You have to get at least 3 wins, I think, in the next 4 weeks. I mean, you could go 2-2 again. It's not going to kill you, but this is a winnable slate of games, and you need to start building up that momentum because you're not going to have that 8-game win streak like we did at the beginning of last year.
My key does revolve around Prescott, but it revolves in the fact that the Bengals defensive line needs to really maintain their lanes, maintain what their responsibilities are, because even though you mentioned Prescott hasn't done a lot of running so far this year, he can do it, and he can maneuver in the pocket. And those, at times, especially young guys that the Bengals haven't seen before, these are the types of quarterbacks that give the Bengals fits. Trevor Siemian, not really a runner per se, but he's nimble and he can move around in the pocket. He gave him all kinds of fits. Ben Roethlisberger, time and time again, not a very nimble guy, but can move around, can bounce off tackles. He gives them fits. So, I think if the Bengals maintain their lanes and still are able to get a good pass rush, this should be a long day for the rookie quarterback. If they break contain and Prescott can move around a little bit, maybe dump the ball off to Elliott on some broken coverages, that sort of thing, I think it could be a long day for the Bengals defense. So I think the play from the front four and also allowing lanes for the linebackers to come in and make plays on Elliott to minimize gains, I think that's going to be huge this week, in my opinion. What are some of your big keys? Let us know. You can contact us at Bengals OBI on Twitter. You can leave comments or anything else on our iTunes account that we have up. You can leave a comment at Cincy Jungle when we post this podcast and get in touch with us there. You can email us at theobinsider@gmail.com if you have questions or comments. We have been answering quite a few. Last week, we actually did a live fan question segment, which was really fun. So let us know, keep in touch with us, and give us some of your keys to victory, because we love to hear from the listeners and appreciate your support as always. So moving on from the Cowboys game, and we'll get to a score prediction at the end, as we always do, Connor. One of the really neat things that occurred, and you almost wonder if the NFL Network drew it up like this. The Bengals won on Thursday Night Football on NFL Network against the Dolphins. And then one night later, they have a documentary of a football life on Chad Johnson, or Chad Ochocinco, and kind of chronicling his NFL career, giving some of his insight on some things, and really taking a trip down memory lane for a lot of Bengals fans. Now, not to throw you under the bus, but you're quite a bit younger than me, Connor, and you may not remember a lot of the things from the mid-2000s that I remember and was reminded of when I saw the Football Life documentary, and you had told me you saw it as well. What are some of your things that popped out to you, being a little bit on the younger end of the fan spectrum for the Bengals?
I didn't see the early era Chad Johnson. I saw him when he was Chad Johnson. I'm pretty sure I started watching the Bengals when I was in like 8th grade. So I think I'm gonna say like 2006-ish. And Chad Johnson just immediately captured my attention as just a guy who wanted, I think, and NFL Films did such a great job of capturing this, but he just wanted to give the fans their money's worth. Nowadays, fans are so insistent on booing the home team if the home team's losing because I didn't pay to go to a game where the team loses. Regardless of whether the Bengals won or lost, which fortunately they ended up winning a lot when he was in Cincinnati, he was going to put on a show. He was going to do things that made you feel good about giving your money to the Bengals for, because he's going to go and he's going to do that, propose to the cheerleader, or, get up on the camera and look around on the camera, or put on the Hall of Fame jacket. I think it was just, and I think the biggest takeaway I had from that was just that so many people call Chad Johnson a diva, and people are quick to toss that word around with guys like Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown. And I'm not going to say neither one of those guys are divas, but what I'll say is the difference between Johnson and nowadays with excessive celebration was that these guys are all about, bringing attention on themselves. And I think that Johnson definitely had he definitely in some aspect wanted the attention, but he did a pretty good job in the video of articulating that it was more of just that he wanted to give Cincinnati something to root for, and he wanted to make fans excited to watch football, and he was just an electric guy, and he's one of the biggest reasons why I'm a Bengal fan. It's just because he was such an easy guy to root for, and there's all the drama and everything like that happened, but he's just a guy who made football fun. And I think you can't really take away from that.
It's also funny, and some good thoughts there. It's also funny because that's on Friday evening as well. There was a top 10 wide receivers of the 2000s. And, there were guys like Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Chad Johnson, Marvin Harrison. Most of those guys were the showmen, even to the point of, I mentioned 3 of those names there, Moss, Owens, and Johnson, they really fell out of favor with their teams because of their antics, their attitude, all of that stuff. So I think initially, especially when Cincinnati was so bad before Marvin Lewis arrived, I think initially it was both. It was a perfect storm. It was a brand new franchise quarterback in Carson Palmer. It was a brand new coach who had won a Super Bowl with the division rival Ravens, and they had a talented wide receiver that was underachieving because they didn't have really good quarterback play the first 2 years of his career to that point. So it was kind of this perfect combination for Chad to say, I'm going to really harness this. I think let's have some fun, but I want to win. I think a lot of people misconstrue, and I forget it, that a lot of it is just deep-rooted, and he wanted to win. He wanted to have fun, and he wanted to be a showman, but he wanted to win. And when the team started to really fall apart, both because of injuries and free agency and lack of playoff success and all of that, the antics got old, and the name change got old as he did, when he did that. And I think I
never liked the name change. I thought it was dumb.
I didn't either. If he wanted to kind of do it on the side, and like T.O. went by T.O., if he wanted to call himself Ocho Cinco on the side, awesome. Don't do it to a jersey. Don't put that name on the jersey. I think that's where things got sour. And then there was this contract dispute where he basically kind of sort of wanted to be traded. The Bengals didn't do it. And he was kind of disgruntled the last couple of years. He did have one more productive year when the Bengals made the playoffs in 2009, but still was one of the most talented receivers in his era. And you compare him to some of those guys, and he's not the physical specimen of Owens or Moss or even A.J. Green, who I call the anti-Chad because he's so quiet and he's so humble, and he doesn't do a lot of the celebrations or any of that stuff. But you heard Ray Lewis talk about his quick feet. You heard Carson Palmer say that cornerbacks were scared to death as they went up to him one-on-one. I think
he'd tell them the routes he ran. I mean, that's the ultimate power move.
That's pretty ballsy. I'm not going to lie. I think two things that stuck out to me is you thought that bridges were burned with Johnson and Marvin Lewis and Carson Palmer, and that didn't really seem to be the case. Carson was gushing about him, and maybe he was kind of being, NFL poster boy, being the good guy and doing what a quarterback is supposed to do. But he paid him a lot of compliments, and there was talk at the end of Ocho's career that relationship wasn't going so well. And it's the same with the coach, and obviously that Marvin Lewis was the guy that was in charge of shipping him off to New England. So you saw some things and some, I think Johnson he was watching a video by Marvin where he found an old soccer ball and was laughing about it. And I think he still keeps in contact with Marvin. I don't know his relationship with Carson at this point, but it seems to be okay. And that surprised me a little bit. The other thing that surprised me a little bit, talking about Palmer and Johnson, is Chad claims, and Carson corroborated the story, that Chad claims that it was Carson's idea for the Ocho Cinco name and that he should go by Ocho Cinco. And that was
weird.
Yeah, I didn't expect that at all, especially because Palmer, for all of the hard feelings that are also there with Bengals fans, Palmer is a low-key guy. Even his trade demand thing was very low-key, was not in the media. He didn't want to talk to anybody. And it just seems like so against what Carson would have wanted, at least from perception. So that surprised me. But overall, I thought it was really well done. You saw some things, especially if you don't remember or you haven't seen him for a while. I mean, you saw this offense with TJ Hushmanzada, Chad, and Chris Henry, and it was unstoppable, which was fun to watch. You relived some painful memories in terms of Carson Palmer getting hurt in that playoff game against the Steelers. And, it was really well done.
I think the one thing that I really would have liked to see, which isn't really an indictment on them, but it would have been awesome for them to talk about his durability. I mean, they talked about his feet, and his feet were no one's ever going to have the footwork Chad Johnson had. That's what made him special. But he didn't miss a game in his career. And I know that he had that weird thing where he talked about that he used to soak his like injured like limbs in like teammates' urine and stuff like that, which I thought that'd be so funny for a movie. But I mean, I would understand why they wouldn't put that in. But he was super, super durable, and he obviously played through a lot of stuff too. So that was his toughness is also something that I think people didn't really credit him enough for.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that jumped out at me, especially as they chronicled the last couple of years of his career in New England and Miami, there are Bengals free agents, especially under Marvin Lewis, who have gone on and still had productive careers elsewhere. Mohamed Sanu's doing some nice things in Atlanta, and Marvin Jones is doing some nice things in Detroit. But pre-Marvin and early era Marvin Lewis, these guys that were maybe disgruntled and wanted to leave for greener pastures, not everybody found that things were going to be so much better with another team. Chad Johnson was a guy that struggled with New England, obviously didn't even end up latching on in Miami. And then
that was really sad in Miami, man. I thought he was gonna come back.
He probably would have had a decent season if he didn't. That's a self-inflicted wound on his part, though. I mean, it's sad.
It's cool that he owned up to it.
Yeah, it's sad, but I mean, that's something. His mistake, you just can't do. So, at any rate, those are just kind of some of our observations. I thought it was really well done. Especially seeing it after a Bengals win, it made you feel a little bit better and a little more positive about the team and reminiscing on that front. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure the NFL Network will show it again at some point soon. They tend to rerun those, as well as that top 10 list. That was actually very entertaining, even though Chad was just I think he was number 7 on that list. So check that out, because you're going to see a lot of talented guys on that and a lot of fun guys on that.
Early 2000s is a great era for especially wide receivers with Harrison.
It was insane. Yeah, Torrey Holt. I mean, it was insane. Yeah. So those are our observations on a Football Life documentary with Chad Johnson. One quick note, and this is another thing that we could probably talk a long time about, Connor, but Mike Brown recently spoke with the media. I don't exactly remember which media outlet it was. I think it was maybe the Sporting News. He talked about a number of things, and one of them was, again, his reluctance to really commit to a ring of honor with the Cincinnati Bengals. And almost every team in the NFL has it. Granted, a lot of other teams have a lot more of a decorated history because of Super Bowl wins and things of that nature. But the Bengals have had a number of great players in their history, and there's only one retired jersey on their team, and that's Bob Johnson, who was their very first pick as a franchise and was a center. Not Anthony Munoz, not Boomer Esiason, not Ken Anderson.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's very weird. Mike Brown danced around the topic a little bit, saying, we have pictures up of players in our stadium. Well, you and we live on the West Coast. You go to an Angels game or a Padres game, I see Mike Witt. I mean, all these guys in Angel Stadium, that's just part and parcel of what you do to a franchise.
The Chargers have an entire actual ring around their Qualcomm Stadium on the inside. I think they have 2 or 3 of them, 2 to 3 rows with every single player's name, pretty much.
So, are you frustrated in hearing this, or are you kind of just like, well, that's Mike Brown and that's the way it's been? I'm not surprised.
I thought the comments were so strange, the way that he worded that, or he was saying something along the lines of, "Oh, well, no one's going to remember those guys." And I remember seeing a comment that was like, well, yeah, that's the point, is that you want people to remember those guys. Like, I remember seeing the Chargers Ring of Honor, their longtime kicker named Rolf Benershka, who ended up becoming, he got some sort of really insane sickness that the city rallied around him, and he eventually started some sort of like charity thing that happens on a yearly basis. And I remember seeing his name on the Ring of Honor, and I was like, that's a weird name. And I didn't know, I think he was like, also, he was actually a really good kicker back in the day I want to say like the Freezer Bowl era, but whenever that was, 80s. But I know him. Like I met him. I went to school with his son. He's a really cool guy. And it's not that, oh, they need to honor like a guy like that, but it's cool to see people's names. And they're like the alumni of a team are generally going to stay, or at least some of them are going to stay in the area. And so it's a great way to honor people who have not only played for a team for so long, but every single Tuesday, these guys are out doing all their community service. And it's not going to get the Twitter traction or Facebook traction that, post on Antonio Brown's touchdown celebration is going to get. But at the end of the day, they're doing so much for their community every single week, and they're playing for their team. And I think a Ring of Honor is supposed to be something that commemorates the longevity of a player's career or the impact that he brings to a team. And so by saying that, oh, well, we have pictures up, but okay, but it's a great way, especially for a team, like you mentioned, they have one retired jersey. I think they have like one player that's ever made the Hall of Fame in Munoz. Who else has been commemorated? Like, what does Ken Anderson have for himself, aside from like he has a reputation and the fact that he could work for the Bengals whenever he wants to. But I mean, you have to commemorate people. You have to commemorate people, and I think it's crazy that they don't do it.
So here's the exact comment that he gave, and it's actually pretty irritating, to be honest with you. He said it was with the Sporting News, as I mentioned. It's an oddly complicated issue. We honor our old Pro Bowl players. We put up large permanent posters of them in the building, and that has been our way of doing this. I was at a stadium recently, and I looked around at the Ring of Honor players they have, and I would tell you that these are guys that played 30, 40, 50 years ago. People don't know who the hell they are. These things have a shelf life, and I wonder whether there isn't a better way to recognize old contributing players. We're going to try and do it by focusing on the Pro Bowl players and putting up something on our website. We're pressed to have this. We're pressed to have the space. Yeah, we're pressed to have the space to do it on the stadium itself. So we will do it our way and hope that the old players and the fans understand that it is a bona fide effort to recognize these people that played here and made the team what it is today. The comment of people don't know who the hell they are, that's the entire point of having a Ring of Honor, because that's the entire point of having a Ring of Honor. When you go to a stadium and you're a younger fan, you're an older fan, and you see guys, oh my gosh, I caught, as in my age, I caught really the tail end of Anthony Munoz's career and still knew he was great. I caught the tail end of Boomer Esiason's Bengals career, knew he was great. But you go back and there's all these other guys, Lamar Parrish and all these other guys in the 60s and 70s. And I would think it would be so cool if you go in there, you go to a game, and part of, for instance, I went out there to see a game, the Denver game. I would have loved to have part of my trip be like a deal where, hey, let's go to the pro shop and then let's check out the Ring of Honor and check out old video clips and jerseys and what they did. And I think he's just still out of touch, even though he's given the reins quite a bit to Marvin Lewis and Katie Blackburn. He's still out of touch with the fan base. And the fact that
the comment of, we'll put something on the website was the best part, because Bengals.com is one of the worst websites I've ever used. And granted, every single NFL team is very, very far behind technologically because they're all run by a bunch of people who aren't very technologically sound. I mean, the ownership, the people who work for the team obviously know what they're doing, but Bengals.com has used the same font for like 30 years and they haven't updated well,
they want uniformity amongst the teams. Yeah, they want uniformity amongst the team sites. Yeah, and I see what you're saying there. But the fact that he doesn't get that, people don't know who they are, these things have a shelf life. Well, tell that to Green Bay Packers fans. I mean, you go to Lambeau Field, and part of the experience of doing that is going to their Ring of Honor and checking out all of the old players and the history of the team. So I just don't understand his reluctance in doing it. He said there's space issues at the stadium. Well, that's the stadium you designed and arm wrestled the city for back in
they're still on the hook for
in the late 90s. So I don't know, man. I hope not that I want the guy to pass away or anything like that. I would never wish that, but I hope once a baton is passed in terms of ownership officially, I hope that attitude changes. And there are many deserving players and coaches, especially on a weekend where you saw Sam Weish, who is just had a heart transplant, one of the best coaches in Bengals history. That's a guy who should be easily shown all around that stadium. So I don't know. Any additional thoughts?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. You hope that once he completely gives up the reins, that they just become more I mean, the Bengals just aren't a forward-thinking franchise. I don't think there's a problem with that. I think that it just makes fans very irritated because you see it. I mean, having worked for the Chargers, it was nice to see that they have their whole digital media department that's doing all of this stuff, and the Bengals have their own digital media department, but it's still just not. It's still behind. It's just not at the same level that a lot of other teams are at, and it's just the mindset that like, oh no, what like those guys are a bunch of old people, but like these guys are guys who played for you. These guys are people who played for Cincinnati. You would think that he would understand that and have a little more value of the city and the players that have played. But I mean,
yeah, whatever. And it's the same deal as great of a football coach and icon Paul Brown, his father, was. It was the same deal. He kept players at an arm's length. He kept the fan base at an arm's length, and that's something that Mike Brown, unfortunately, has built his reputation upon as well. So, Ring of Honor, keep waiting, Bengals fans. One last little segment that we have before we do score predictions and get out of here. We've done a couple times in this show's history, we've done hypotheticals. And in these hypotheticals, we ask kind of a would you rather type of thing. And you, Connor, got a question. You found one in the comment section of, I believe it was a post on Cincy Jungle, and there is a game this week, Cleveland and New England. Cleveland is 0-4. New England is 3-1. New England just got embarrassed by the Buffalo Bills. I believe it was 13-0 or something to that effect. Did play with Jacoby Brissett, their number 3 quarterback, so that obviously had something to do with it. Last time we saw them get embarrassed by the Kansas City Chiefs on national television, they really took it to the Bengals, and I believe that was in 2014, and that was just a miserable game from a Bengals fan standpoint. But there was a question of who would you want to win? Cleveland, from the standpoint, I assume, of AFC playoff seedings and the Bengals potentially gaining ground and maybe getting to 3-2 if they win this week. New England falling to 3-2, and then the teams play in week 6 to kind of further potentially further either team's playoff picture chances there. Or do you want New England to win because of not only a division rival losing, but the fact that you don't really want the Patriots playing PO'd the way they did a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting scenario. I if it's a 10 o'clock game, I'm definitely going to watch it. But I mean, I saw the question, and I saw the person who posed the question say, "I'd rather New England win because of the whole like the on to Cincinnati game where after the Patriots lost to the Chiefs and everyone was like, oh, is Brady done? They just smoked the Bengals." And it's an interesting question. I mean, the playoff implications. New England losing a conference game would be huge, and Cleveland getting a win. I mean, it's not going to do anything for the AFC North implications. So maybe it helps the Bengals in some way if the AFC North is a tougher division than other divisions. I'm not sure if that factors into tiebreakers at all. But personally, I would love to see Cleveland win. I don't care. I mean, it's hard to think that the Bengals are going to even come. I mean, I don't know. I'm a very big optimist, but playing the Patriots in Foxborough is just something. I don't know the last. I think in the past 3 seasons, I'm guessing probably one team has won in Foxborough. The Patriots almost always go undefeated there, even without Tom Brady, as we saw. And so I think it'd be awesome to see Cleveland beat New England and all the storylines. I'm sure the whole on to Cincinnati game would happen, and I don't know. It would bring adversity to the Bengals be facing adversity, which would be interesting to say the least. So I don't know. I think a Browns win would be so much fun. I think the Browns, I don't think they're the only winless team in the NFL. I don't think they're the worst team in the NFL. Terrell Pryor looks good. Corey Coleman looked great before getting hurt. Carl Nassib, their DN, looked good before getting hurt. They're an exciting young team, and I think that Hugh Jackson's doing good things right there right now. But I think it'd be awesome to see it. I would love to see the media freak out after a Browns Patriots. I don't know what I would do with myself if the Browns beat the Patriots.
Well, that's the reason why I would disagree with you, because I think any other week, if New England just beat the Bills and then they lost to the Browns, I would say, yeah, I'll root for the Browns, I guess. That's fine. But I don't see it would be not beneficial for the Bengals to play a very, very upset Patriots team. If they get shut out and embarrassed against the Bills, they lose to a winless Cleveland team. That is exactly the type of formula that happened when the Patriots played inspired football against the Bengals, and they looked absolutely scared against New England in that game. You've got Tom Brady returning. Possibly at some point, Gronkowski's going to be returning probably in that week 6 game. So that
was the last game that I turned off in the middle of the game. I think I left after the third quarter.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't really care if Cleveland wins, so be it. But I think just based on what happened a couple of years ago, I'd rather not have more fuel to the New England fire as the Bengals
go don't
in
poke
there.
The bear.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a gigantic bear with the sour but brilliant Bill Belichick, sour but awesome Tom Brady. I just think unfortunately, I think the Browns they're going to take it to the Browns this week because of what happened last week. I think that's going to be their target this week. But
the Brady's back game, it's gonna live in infamy, I bet.
Yeah. So I don't know. I see both sides, but I think I'd rather see New England win, and just it also brings more hype to the game if the Bengals end up winning this week. You got a 3-2 team against a 4-1 team, and it really kind of bumps up the status of that game too. So, but I see what you're saying though. Before we get out of here, let's give your prediction about kind of some things that play out in a score, Connor, in terms of the Bengals against Dallas.
I'm going to look at my score prediction while I'm talking here, but I think the one thing that the Bengals do really, really well is get AJ Green the ball. And I think, Morris Claiborne's playing pretty well for the Cowboys, but I haven't watched any Morris Claiborne tape. But it doesn't matter who AJ Green's facing, to be honest, because he's like we saw, he got 77 yards against the Broncos, who have one of the best pass defenses in the entire NFL. So, and that was a quote-unquote down week. So the Bengals are going to give the ball to AJ Green, I think. I think what they should do is establish a run game. And we say that every single week, and it doesn't happen. Jeremy Hill might break off a 50-yard run, but aside from that, they're not going to be running on consistently and gashing the defense. This is a game where the offensive line needs to get its continuity back. You have a pretty weak D-line, probably the weakest D-line you'll go against the entire year. I want to see them run it. I want to see AJ Green get involved as well. And final score prediction, what did I say? I said, I don't want to contradict myself here. Oh, I didn't say. I guess I'll go 24-20 Bengals.
Not a bad call. I don't know what to make of this game, to be honest with you, because I don't know what to make of the Bengals. And I'd like to think that last week is a show that, we rebounded well. We're getting things together with some new personnel and battling through injuries and people being out of the lineup. But that 5 field goal mark really concerns me. I mean, I'm glad Nugent hit all of them, but being able to punch the ball into the end zone is so key in the NFL. And when you start playing these good teams and you settle for field goals instead of touchdowns, that ends up biting you. And we saw it happen a couple weeks ago against Pittsburgh as well. That was kind of the one of the storylines of that game. So I think this could be either a very tightly contested game, or I think the Bengals could really blow them out if they play their game. I think 24-20 is a really solid prediction. I will say I'll say 27-24 Bengals. And I do think Dallas is working out kickers this week, which might be also kind of a hidden issue because I think Dan Bailey is maybe battling an injury, so there's some issues there. But it's either going to be a very good game or one that I think the Bengals run away with. And, it wouldn't surprise me if it is a good game if Dallas ends up kicking a late field goal and winning it. But let's hope
I think that point on the kickers was good, too. I'm totally forgot about that. Yeah, because Bailey's out, probably, which I think they're working out Robbie Gould and Kai Forbath, and neither one of those guys has played on a team this year. I don't even know if either one of those guys was – I know Robbie Gould got cut before training camp, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know if either one of them have been kicking on a team in a long time. So that's something to look out for.
Yeah. And, no Dez. Even though Prescott's played pretty well, no Romo. There's a lot of things kind of going against Dallas in this, but they are hosting the Bengals, even though the Bengals are coming off that long week. That's going to do it for episode 11 of the Orange and Black Insider. Again, download us on iTunes. Check us out on Cincy Jungle. We post this podcast on that website. We're also on SoundCloud. You can follow us on our YouTube channel. We're on Twitter at BengalsOBI. So follow us on any different types of platforms. We're pretty much everywhere. And we appreciate the support and all of the people listening to this program. Connor, thanks for joining me this week. I know our comrade Scott Schulte couldn't, but appreciate you making it happen.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, good to have you. All right, folks, enjoy this weekend slate of games. Let's hope the Bengals come out of Big Dallas with a win. Hoo day.
Hoo day.